I guess that probably what I should first of all do is give you a sense of what a village town is, because there's so much misinformation out there and people fill in the gaps with other things and it gets a bit confusing. Because it is both really new and really old. It's based on fairly proven and timeless concepts, but yet it's put together in a way that isn't that familiar. And so it's probably easier to first of all think of it like it's a corporation. Think of it like a Google campus that is based on some fairly solid business planning, and it's based, but unlike a company town where a single business moves in, if it's successful you get Silicon Valley, but if it fails or gets bought out, that economy disappears. This is one that is based on probably 500 to 1,000 small to medium enterprises that are brought together under a corporate structure that essentially takes the profits that come from a typical real estate development. We don't use a developer. We use what's called a civitas corporation. It's a standard corporation under California law. The word civitas simply implies what's involved in it as kind of a civic responsibility. And what that means is that the whole thing is founded under, I guess, really traditional capitalism and market forces there. We don't take the profits that a developer would normally take out of the community because we use this corporation. We leave those profits in the community, and they invest those in those small to medium enterprises. So if you thought about this in a way like a kind of Google campus, that would be a way to think about it. Another way to think about it is like a shopping mall, in that it's going to be car-free within, and everything's within walking distance, except it's a shopping mall where people not only have stores, but they have businesses, they have schools, they live there. But it functions in a sort of similar way, and this actually has important implications in the fire area, because you don't drive a fire truck down the middle of the shopping mall. The other thing, of course, is that with a shopping mall, you have, do they use the International Building Code here? So I think it's Class 2A non-combustible, and we're essentially shooting for 2A non-combustible, so it's nothing to burn, and then possibly even in some of it sprinkled, so that the issues of fire, for example, are addressed in a completely different manner than traditional real estate development. The other way to think about it is that it's not an intentional community, it's an alternative to suburban sprawl. This is basically, I actually grew up with and knew the people who invented the suburbs. If you're in the planning business and you know the name Jim Rouse and the Rouse Company, the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, the City of Columbia, Faneuil Hall in Boston, all of these innovative things were my parents' friends. I went to school with their kids. And so I really learned a lot of that innovative stuff in real estate development. I learned it as a kid. And essentially, those people recognized that while the suburban development was very successful in its time, it had a lot of, if you will, mortgages that came with it, and they were mortgages on the future. And right now, for example, I gather this county is paying some mortgages in terms of retirement benefits that it has, somebody earlier said, yes, we can do this. Now you have a debt problem that you're needing to solve. And so in this regard, we've learned that the suburban development has a lot of costs to it, congestion, pollution, other things like that. And as the price of oil goes up, suddenly that suburb doesn't look quite as attractive as it used to. And so this can be understood also as an alternative or sort of a 21st century better way to build a more suburban sprawl. Now the basis of it is really what we call normal. Not what is normal, but what we all believe when we say, for example, it's normal for kids to play outside and not have to be supervised by parents. It's normal for old people to stay in their community until they die, not be the sort of thing we do today. And so a lot of it was we started looking at what we would all agree is normal, for some reason doesn't happen anymore, and ask, why not? And of course we find out, for example, if you have cars in your community, you can't let your kid play in the street unless you live in a cul-de-sac, because the kid's going to get run over. And as soon as you introduce cars, you also lose a measure of safety. that predators can come in, you're afraid somebody's going to abduct your kid or things like that. As soon as you live in one of those traditional towns where everybody knows everybody, and if some stranger comes in and looks a bit suspect, somebody's going to check him out within 5 minutes, and they certainly aren't going to get into the same level of trouble. The chairman emeritus of our group until he died was Stuart Udall. I don't know if you know the name, but he was Secretary of the Interior under Kennedy and Johnson. He was also a congressman in 1956 when the Interstate Highway Act was adopted, and he was one of the people who saw the drawbacks of it first. And I got to know Stuart late in his life when he wrote a letter to his grandchildren that got published on the internet. And I contacted him. It just happened that my mother-in-law worked for his brother for 20 years in Capitol Hill, so I was able to contact him. And I said, today's generation doesn't read letters, they watch YouTube videos. Can I come video you? And I sent him the book, and he said, that's the only reason he let me in. He says he doesn't see anybody. But he started talking about the way he grew up. I mean, for example, small communities, he said, we didn't have a tolerance for crime. We just didn't tolerate it. It's sort of hard to think in that way today. We just accept it. He said, no, it just doesn't happen. And the respect for old people, for what they've done, was just built into how the community worked. And so a lot of what's normal is things he was reminding me of, telling me those stories. And so we collected these ideas. I did with a number of other people over the years. There's very little in a village town that is my idea or somebody. It's all a collection of what works. In some regards, it's the true meaning of conservative. Why throw out things if they work well? Let's just use them. But there are other aspects of it that are about technology. 20 years ago, if you wanted to run a successful business where you needed to be near the experts, near your advisors, even near your competitors, you had to be in a big city. You had to be in San Francisco or something like that. We call it the tyranny of distance, and what the internet has now done is completely changed that so that you can be anywhere. In fact, Steve's wife has just been asked to run a major new, what do you call it, internet-type company, and she's not going to be working at the office, doesn't need to. And the implication of that for community development is absolutely huge, because it means you can now start picking where you want to be, not on the traditional basis of near a big city and you have to put up with the costs and all the problems that are involved in that. You can pick a place for quality of life. You can pick a place for beauty, for amenity, and it also means that you're no longer commuting. So that if you pick a place, if we do a suburban development, the first thing you're going to do is talk about, right, how many cars are going to be on the road? You know, what kind of sprawl are we going to be dealing with? And as soon as you have something where people live and work and play and do everything in a local district, while we don't take the cars away, they just don't need them. And that does a few things. That first of all means about 15% of your annual income and household income goes to transportation. And if you say transportation is shoe leather, it's a lot cheaper. It also means that when you place it somewhere in an area, many of the usual objections or concerns about a development go away. One of the ones that we found, for example, which we don't necessarily even think would be an issue here, but is what we call cross-boundary conflicts. So you take a rural area and you put something in the middle of the neighbors, all of a sudden go, wait a minute, I'm going to have this big development right next to me. And so we came up with this concept, which I'll show a picture of here, called the green belt. And so the urban core is right there in the middle, where you have where people live, and then the whole thing's surrounded by a big green belt there, which adds to the acreage, but it means that all the neighbors see are trees, and all they hear are, you know, the sounds of wind and that sort of thing. And that just immediately solves a major concern. And it also has another effect, and it gives the residents there a true experience of nature. When I was a kid, we had huge woods behind us, and I think from the time I was 6, we were down there, and all you did was listen for the bell when it was time to come home for dinner. And I had kind of a Tom Sawyer upbringing. And one of the reasons I have to say that we moved to New Zealand is when my daughter was that age, I wanted her to be out there. I didn't want to worry about Lyme's disease. I didn't want to worry about rattlesnakes and all the other stuff that today you have to worry about. and don't have any of that down there. We just, and also horse riding's cheap because they eat grass all year. And so we got her a horse, and she had one of those real proper upbringings. Now, of course, she wants me to do something in California because she loves California and wants to be back here. So so the village town starts and operates completely differently than what you'd expect with a conventional real estate development. The first thing is we start with the people who are going to live there. And the reason we do that is because we looked at the most beautiful communities in the world, and we found the reason they were beautiful is because the person who bought the house or commissioned the house to be built was doing it for themselves, their family, and oftentimes for future generations not even born yet. And today we, of course, move, I think it's every 3 years is the average in the United States, and many people don't know where they've come from anymore. I mean, certainly here, what I've read, there are quite a few people who have been here for 4 and 5 generations. But I meet a lot of folks nowadays who don't know where their grandparents came from. And that connection results in houses that become commodities. You just sort of put something up and you look at it as something you're going to sell. The most beautiful places, though, are ones where the people made the decisions not strictly for a financial reason. Am I going to have the cheapest door you can get at Home Depot, or am I going to have a beautiful door that I'm going to enjoy coming in and out of for the rest of my life? You buy the better door. And that means that we are actually in the role of enabling the people and the communities that will form in that village town. So we have to identify those people in advance. And then they participate in the planning process.